When I first bought the land near the lake, I didn't just see dirt, trees and water. I saw a future. I saw mornings where the mist hung low over the water as the sun crept up, evenings where the sound of crickets replaced the noise of car, horns, and days where my children and grandchildren could run free without the shadow of a city skyline looming over them. My 1,500 acres were more than just property. They were a promise, a legacy I built with decades of sweat and sacrifice. That land represented freedom. It was the escape I had dreamed of during late nights at work, a reward for years of saving, hand grinding. I built a small cabin on the edge of the lake, nothing fancy, just enough to remind me of why I fought so hard to own it. I walked the trails myself, cut through brush and mapped every ridge and stream. I knew that land like the lines on my hands, and every step reminded me that this was mine, legally, rightfully, and deeply. But not everyone saw it that way. The Homeowners Association across the lake viewed my land differently. To them, it wasn't a dream or a legacy. It was an opportunity. They saw dollar signs, expansion plans, and the kind of power that comes from controlling more than just a neighborhood. The HOA had long arms, and like a spider spinning its web, they wanted everything caught in it, including me. It started subtly, little hints. A board member casually asking if I'd ever thought about developing. A neighbor mentioning how beneficial it would be if the HOA could manage my land. I always smiled politely and shut down the conversation. I wasn't interested. My land wasn't for sale. Period. Then one day, everything changed. I walked down to the mailbox, expecting the usual bills and flyers, but instead found an official-looking envelope stamped with the HOA's seal. I didn't think much of it at first, and maybe some generic notice, but when I opened it, my heart stopped. The letter wasn't a request. It wasn't even a warning. It was a statement. According to the HOA, my 1,500 acres had been reassessed and reassigned under their jurisdiction. They claimed my land was now subject to their authority, and worse, they were preparing to sell portions of it for community growth. Sell my land. I read the letter 3 times, thinking surely I was misunderstanding. But no. The words were clear. They were trying to take what was mine without a handshake, without a conversation, without even a shred of legality. My name was still on the deed. My taxes were paid, yet here they were, arrogantly assuming they could erase me with a piece of paper. The betrayal cut deeper than I could explain. These weren't strangers hundreds of miles away. These were the same people who smiled at me during their morning jogs, the same ones who waved when I passed on the dirt road, the same board members who pretended to be friendly neighbors. Behind their polished smiles, they had been plotting to rip away everything I had worked for. For days I couldn't sleep. I walked my property line again and again, each step feeling heavier. The tall pines, the creeks trickling through, the wide-open fields, all of it felt under threat. I imagined bulldozers rolling in, tearing apart the forest to make way for vacation homes and tennis courts. I could almost hear the sound of saws cutting down the trees I planted with my own hands. Every acre held a memory, and now every memory was at risk. And the worst part, they thought I wouldn't fight back. The HOA counted on intimidation. They had lawyers on retainer, money in their accounts, and a history of bullying homeowners into silence. To them, I was just one man, one landowner without the backing of a board or the weight of a corporation. They believed I would cave, that I'd sign whatever paper they pushed under my nose, too scared to stand against them. But what they didn't know was this. I wasn't just a man with land. I was a man with a plan. At first, my anger was blinding. I wanted to storm into their office, slam the letter on the table and shout until they backed down. But I realized that rage wouldn't save my acres. What would save them was patience, intelligence, and precision. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But it would be fought on my terms. I started digging. Night after night, I combed through county records, zoning laws, and land deeds. I visited the courthouse so often that the clerks knew me by name. I spoke with surveyors, real estate experts, and even old-timers who remembered the boundaries of my land before the HOA neighborhood even existed. Every scrap of evidence I gathered became a weapon, and the deeper I dug, the more I discovered. The HOA wasn't just overreaching. They were sloppy. They had filed paperwork improperly, misrepresented boundaries, and ignored legal restrictions. That had been in place for decades. Their arrogance blinded them. They thought no one would ever challenge their authority. But I was going to challenge it, and I was going to win. The turning point came one night as I sat at my cabin table, surrounded by stacks of documents. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, not from fear, but from resolve. I realized this wasn't just about saving my land anymore. This was about justice, about standing up against people who believed power gave them the right to steal. That was the night I stopped being a victim. That was the night I became something else. Entirely, I wasn't going to let them take my 2,500 acres. No, I was going to take everything they thought they owned. And as I looked out at the darkened forest, hearing the distant sound of the lake against the shore, I swore to myself that the HOA would regret ever underestimating me. The day I walked into the courthouse with my binder full of evidence, I felt a calm I hadn't felt since the nightmare began. My nerves weren't gone. They were sharpened, like a blade honed for battle. The HOA thought they had me cornered. What they didn't realize was that I had been building something far stronger than their intimidation, an airtight case. I filed my lawsuit with a steady hand, each signature echoing like a nail in the HOA's coffin. My claim was simple yet devastating: illegal sale of private land, fraudulent misrepresentation of jurisdiction, and violation of multiple property laws. I wasn't just defending my 500 acres, I was dragging every one of their dirty tricks into the light. The news spread fast. By the end of the week, whispers turned into full-blown panic among the HOA board members. Their confidence evaporated. They had strutted around the community like untouchable kings and queens, but now they were hiding behind closed doors, scrambling for lawyers who weren't already conflicted out of the case. When the first court hearing arrived, the board showed up dressed in expensive suits trying to project authority, but no amount of tailored fabric could hide the sweat on their brows. I sat calmly at my table, a binder thicker than a phone book in front of me, every document in chronological order. The judge barely let them finish their opening statement before raising an eyebrow. "You're claiming authority over land that was never deeded to you? Land still legally under the plaintiff's name?" The HOA's lawyer fumbled. "Well, Your Honor, the reassessment isn't ownership," the judge snapped. "Show me the transfer deed." Silence. They didn't have one, because it didn't exist. That silence was the crack in their armor I'd been waiting for. I leaned forward, sliding across maps, tax records, and affidavits. Every page was a nail in the board's coffin. Each time I spoke, the judge nodded, his expression hardening against them. By the time I was done, it wasn't just a case of overreach, it was a case of criminal fraud. But I wasn't finished. Weeks turned into months as the case unfolded, and with every new hearing, I hit them harder. I subpoenaed their financial records, and what I found was worse than I could have imagined. Misuse of community funds, secret kickbacks from developers, even personal vacations charged to HOA expenses. They had been bleeding their own community dry while trying to steal from me. The homeowners, the very people the board claimed to represent, were furious when the truth came out. Meetings that once praised the board turned into shouting matches. Neighbors who had once shrugged off the HOA's power now demanded resignations. The board had betrayed not just me, but everyone who trusted them. And then came the final blow. My attorney, who by now had become as invested in this fight as I was, leaned over one evening and said, "We have enough to push for liquidation." Liquidation. The word hung in the air like thunder. If granted, it meant the HOA's assets, their clubhouse, their funds, even their management rights, would be seized and sold to pay restitution, and I would be first in line to collect. When the ruling finally came down, I'll never forget the look on their faces. The judge's gavel slammed, and the HOA was ordered to liquidate. My land was restored to me without question, my title reaffirmed, and the board members personally fined for their misconduct. But it didn't stop there, because when the dust settled, the neighborhood itself was put on the market. And with the restitution I received, combined with the damages they were forced to pay, I had enough leverage to step in as the buyer. The same board members who once tried to sell my acres now watched in horror as I legally purchased their entire neighborhood. Every home, every common area, every piece of the empire they thought they ruled was transferred under my name. And I didn't do it out of greed. I did it to make a point. Standing in front of the homeowners at the first community meeting under my ownership, I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I simply said, "Your land is safe now. The days of fear and bullying are over. From this day forward, this community serves the people, not the board." The applause that followed shook the room. People hugged me, shook my hand, and thanked me for fighting not just for my acres but for their dignity. As for the former board members, they vanished. Their reputations were ruined, their finances destroyed, their arrogance dismantled brick by brick. They learned the hard way that you can't steal from someone who's willing to fight back with truth, patience, and relentless determination. I walked back to my cabin that night, the air crisp and the stars brighter than I had ever seen them. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, and for the first time in months I felt peace. My 2,500 acres were safe, my neighbors were free, and the HOA that thought they could control everything had nothing left. The land they tried to take became the land that took them down, and I had kept my promise they would regret ever underestimating me.